apartheid. President Ramaphosa appointed envoys and sent them to affected African countries and to send condolences and deliver our apology. In particular, we want to commend the leadership of the SADC countries for taking collective responsibility to address the root causes of this violence that we experience. Last but not least, we want to commend President Buhari of Nigeria for the leadership he provided to clear misunderstandings and normalize relations between our two countries. The South African delegation believe and will live by the words of our icon Nelson Mandela, who taught us that the lives of all Africans, regardless of their country of origins, are not cheap. We shall do everything in our power to protect all Africans in our country. But 1 minute, President, I must say that...
Thank you very much, dear colleague. And now I give the floor to Honorable Pemi Majodina from South Africa.
Honorable President, thank you very much. Let's welcome the report on peace and stability. The previous report on continental free trade cannot be able to be implemented unless we have peace and security in our own continent. We have to respect and deepen democracy. I think it is high time, Honorable President, that the African Union and the Pan-Africanist Parliament engage all member states to respect the will of the majority and also to hold elections at required intervals so as to avoid people clinging to power when they are no longer needed for us to be able to develop our continent. PAP is such an important platform for this particular engagement. Lastly, in support, PAP is Pan-Africanist Parliament, in support to my colleague from Malawi, we dispute as South Africa any notion which seeks to opportunistically and maliciously suggest that we are xenophobic. We are not xenophobic, neither Afrophobic, but the fact of the matter is, out of the 12 people who died, 10 of those people are South Africans.
Merci, cher collègue.
Dear colleague, the floor is now to Professor Syed Fail, a feed from Egypt.
شكرا سيد الرئيس وشكر للجنة على هذا التقرير.
Thank you, Chair. President, I would like to thank the Chair of the Committee for this excellent report. He encouraged my colleagues from the Education Committee and asked that the holding of the next meeting of the Commission in Cairo be held, and we would ask that a letter be sent out, and I would like to express my welcome to you all to come to Egypt. However, there's a specific issue that was raised. Why is terrorism of this nature exists in the entire African region and the Middle East? Well, there are some countries that are providing arms to Africa and the Middle East. We know the origin of these arms. They're states that fund the unjust decisions. For example, Libya, which played a major role in establishing the African Union, has faced numerous cases of aggression, and nothing has been done to address this. There was a decision to disarm its army. How can they fight terrorism if their army no longer exists? So how can we have an African vision, a common African vision to combat terrorism? If we have, I think the Pan-African Parliament should request a specific summit for Africa to discuss all of these issues. I support what our colleague Noureddin said, and I would ask an additional 30 seconds, please, President.
Yeah, I already give you 3 minutes, please.
I used to have
You need to end.
I used to have four. Thank you.
No. No, I didn't give you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you. Yes, Carol?
Merci, Président, pour la...
Thank you, President, for the floor. I'm Agito. It's Agito. Yes, you generally say Agito, but my name is Agito. Honorable Agito. Thank you for the floor, President. I would like to commend the chair of the committee for the presentation of the report. May I point out that amongst the provinces that were mentioned by Mokoko, there's also Bazwele, from whence I come. I know the issue very well. And the United Nations did grant a refugee status based on climate for us. We don't really understand what this climate-related refugee status, it has been mentioned. People in the DRC are overwhelmed by the Mbororo people who are pastoralists, and there's no solution for this to date, as my colleague has said, my colleague Njoli. If there is political will, there are some problems we can easily avoid in our African countries. Our brothers, we will now give the floor to Honorable Abdelaziz Aziz from Somalia.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the floor, and I would also like to thank the Chair and the Committee of Cooperation for the report. Mr. President, the issue of insecurity and peace is a very critical issue in our continent, and unless we address certain issues and the root causes of these problems, I don't think we are going to have a lasting solution to our problems. Mr. President, we have to, when we are talking about insecurity, we need to talk about lack of good governance, we need to talk about climate change, we need to talk about fishing, illegal fishing in our waters, we need to talk about radicalization, we need to talk about so many issues. We need to talk about dumping toxic waste in our waters, in our oceans. Mr. President, we need to address these issues properly, and I would like the chairperson of the Committee of Cooperation to take note of these things. Mr. President, from the Indian Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean, illegal fishing companies from other countries are coming and fishing illegally in our waters, which is unacceptable, Mr. President. We need to take note of that. Mr. President, they talk about piracy. Do you know how this piracy was created in our continent? When these illegal fishing companies come to our waters and fish and take our waters and our mineral resources, what our young boys are going to do? They have to go and capture those illegal fishing companies so we can deal with these international and foreigner companies. Mr. President, the issue of radicalization is another very serious issue in our continent. We really need to tackle these issues, because who is radicalizing our African youth? These are people from outside the continent, and Africans should know that. These are important problems. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
The last on my list is Honorable Buras. You have the floor.
سيد الرئيس أنا مسجل ولم تنادي علي سيد الرئيس شكرا.
Thank you, President. I was on the list, you didn't call my name. Who is it? I don't see your name. What is your name, dear colleague?
من الصحراء الغربية.
Yes. I'm from Western Sahara, Jamel Badil. The rules of procedure state that if you wish to speak, you raise your hand. But unfortunately, on all the lists, I do not have your name nor that of the colleague from Somalia. Mr. President, I did send my name. I did actually sign the list. Okay. I will give you the floor. I'm very strong. We can sleep here if you wish. You have the floor. Dear colleagues, honorable members of parliament, may I thank the chair of the committee for the excellent report that was presented. Our continent, the African continent, as my colleague who spoke earlier talked about terrorism. Algeria has suffered from terrorism. The only countries since the 80s have been facing grave attacks due to terrorism.
machines sont fatiguées.
Even the equipment is failing us. Everyone's tired, says the president. Well, I'm saying that Algeria has faced numerous cases of terrorism to over 200,000 deaths, women, children, and we have suffered. We have asked so many times that an international conference be organized on combating terrorism, but to date no one has responded to this call. So today, honorable members of parliament, terrorism is a disease that we need to combat. Like Libya, for example. Libya has borne the brunt of this and has cost them a great deal. Our brothers in Libya, brothers and sisters in Libya have suffered, and we need to support our brothers and sisters in Libya who are dying daily. Women, children, old people are constantly facing this threat. Many cannot eat or sleep, facing these dangers as a result of terrorism, and they are African people. Today, Libya has been ignored. The problems of Libya need to be resolved by the African Union with the support of the Pan-African Parliament. That African people need to support the people of Libya. We heard about migrants earlier. Libya was a strong country. We have hosted 3 million Africans who lived in Libya. We built schools, we built hospitals as Libya. Libya built roads for African countries, and this is why today our duty must be to support Libya, to be standing with them. We thank you for the floor. I'll now give the floor to the colleague from Libya. You have the floor. Dear colleague, if we continue with our work session, means that the interpreters will have to be paid over time. It seems the debate has been reopened, but I just want you to be aware of this. You have the floor. You may proceed. Thank you, President, for giving me the floor. May I thank the Committee on International Relations, Conflict Resolution and Cooperation for the report. It's true that the Libyan situation has not been mentioned in the current status. Libya. I think the committee needs to take cognizance of the situation in Libya as part of the Sahel region. Libya is a country in Africa and is paying the price for the influx of arms for decades. We are in 2019 now. Since the 4th of April, there has been a serious conflict between peoples in Libya. Many people have lost their lives because of the foreign incursions into the country. Now, when the committee meets in future, they need to visit the areas where conflicts are taking place in Libya. Libyans are African people, and we need to empathize with them. We need to be with them as they suffer. We've had working sessions before. Research has been carried out, but no solutions have been proposed. This needs to change. We need to be with the people of Libya, speak with them, hear their suffering. Our sister talked of migration. We have Mr. President, I'll be very brief. I would like to request that the Pan-African Parliament allocates a special session so that we address the issue of Western Sahara. Thank you, Mr. President. I trust that my proposal will be taken into account. Thank you. You have the floor. Please go ahead. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I wasn't here yesterday to give my name to take part in this very important debate over the very important report presented. I don't need to call it xenophobic because that is not accepted by the host nation. Now they gave an explanation that may not on the other side be accepted by other victims. At this point, Mr. Speaker or Mr. President, the Africa to Africa attack in South Africa is so disturbing in Africa, and it does not tell well on the image of the Pan-African Parliament. We cannot rely on the explanation given by the host nation, and therefore I want to put this committee on task to mount an independent investigation and adequately report to this Parliament as what happened and what was the root cause.
Le débat général est clos.
The general debate is closed now, and before giving the floor to the chairperson, I would just like to say, Mr. Chairperson, that there have been many contributions, and I would like you to answer everything all at once and to be as brief as possible. I would also like us to think about what exactly do we call a political refugee. Nowadays we also have climate change refugees, and because of climate changes in certain areas we have displaced people, people who migrate even to look for good living conditions, and it's not just nomadic people, but in the Lake Chad basin, for example, because of the lake drying up, you have people who have had to Yes, yes. These are called environmental or climate refugees due to climate change. And I was talking about Lake Chad, and in order to be able to fill up Lake Chad again, we would need hundreds of millions of liters of water. It's been so dried up. I would just also like to say to the honorable member from Guinea that we are doing everything we possibly can. And if you look at the Constitutive Act, it's very, very clear. The commissioners from the African Union are indeed supposed to come and report back to the Pan-African Parliament, including the president of the commission. They are supposed to be coming. We do send out invitations, but unfortunately their agendas always seem to be rather full. The ambassadors too have been invited, but apparently many of them have other engagements to attend to, but I can assure you that they are invited to come and report back to the Parliament. Mr. Chairperson, you have 2 or 3 minutes. Thank you, Mr. President. I cannot make a very lengthy response. I would just like to therefore say that there have been very important questions raised, and many in our committee with regards to the lack of participation or lack of activity by the Pan-African Parliament. And so I believe that the Bureau can give us some answers on this. And every time we are supposed to hold a mission, we would like to have more missions to other countries, but we need guarantees from the host countries as to whether we can come in and whether we will have the necessary security. So Libya is an option, but we first need to verify that our members will be safe. As I said earlier, we were provided with the report from the AU, and we couldn't go back on that. The honourable member MP who raised the question about Libya and the fact that it is not covered enough. He is actually a member of our committee and participated in our debates, and Same thing applies to the questions raised about Palestine. And our committee is not supposed to dictate to the president. And in terms of the honorary chairperson position, perhaps we can see what the statutory documents of the AU say on this as to whether this can be done. And my personal feeling with regards to the various comments is that all of us need to pay careful attention to the mounting of nationalism feelings in certain countries, nationalist movements, and I would actually like to congratulate the Pan-African Parliament for maintaining its session here in South Africa despite the xenophobic attacks and despite what has happened, because quite frankly, if we had cancelled, it would have actually just given more impetus and more power to those who wish to threaten and discourage their African brothers and sisters. In terms of our work as a committee, we believe in Africa, we believe in peace and security, we believe in the Pan-African Parliament, and that is why we absolutely insist that these two resolutions be adopted for the good of Africa, and that is that not just our committee but the entire Pan-African Parliament be more visible on the ground, and that we can really be able to defend the rights and the needs of the African people. And if we sound a little bit frustrated, Mr. President, it's because we really want to move forward, and we are sometimes held back by some of the issues that come up. For example, resolutions that are not passed. We definitely, therefore, all need to do lobbying in our own countries to be able to show what work is being done by the Pan-African Parliament. Thank you very much. Thank you, dear colleague. Yes? No. The chairperson has already responded. Do you want to give an answer in his stead?
Il est membre de la commission, donc.
He is a member of the committee, and as chairperson of the committee, I declare our statement closed. So no further comments will be taken from members of the committee. We will examine your resolutions, and I would like to remind you all that we, at the Pan-African Parliament, we are an organ of the African Union, and we all need to speak with one voice for the people of Africa, all the people of Africa. And please don't have the feeling that we are trying to avoid any issues. We are trying to examine all of these issues, and we cannot work against the executive. So we need to look at all the reports, look at all of those in the context of our statutes, and I declare this report adopted. Mr. Clark, you now have the floor for the announcements. Are there any announcements? No, then we don't have any announcements, and I declare this session adjourned for now. We are going to be back at 14:30, please. 14:30, 2 p.m., 2:30 p.m.